think we can bring in Klint and Marc. So quickly about their topic in the morning, some of you who were there, I did briefly mention about the role that modern day middle level management can play in unlocking the potential of an organization, and especially when we talk about employee well-being, the middle management plays a very, very critical role. And what better people to talk about this than two very esteemed gentlemen, both from a professional perspective as well as from a research perspective. They both are held at very high esteem. So ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Dr. Kendrick, who is a senior HR professional, and Dr. Marc Prine, who is an organizational psychologist, and he also runs a company called Managing something. Sorry, Marc, I forgot. I'm sure you guys can throw in a bit more introduction of what you do. Yes, management integrating psychology. Thank you for putting up the screen. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Marc and Klint.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Clint Kendrick, and I'm pleased to be here with Dr. Marc Prine for us to talk a little bit about working with managers as the key to engagement. And part of why we chose this topic is that if you look at the concept of employee engagement, it really is rooted in employee well-being. The original research that led to us looking at engagement was out of research into burnout and stress, a lot of which have been talked about already this morning. Marc, do you want to do a quick intro before we get started?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, afternoon, evening for everybody out there. As Anirban said, my name is Marc Prine. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist and managing member of Management Integrating Psychology, which is an IO psychology consulting firm, as well as Staff Geek, which is an automated assessment and development platform, which we can talk a little bit more about later.
Great. Thanks, Marc. And I'm just going to go ahead and get us started thinking about a situation that many of us have been in, or we have friends who have been in. So this is Sophia, and Sophia is a brand new director in a company called Xylophone Industries. So when we take a look at Sophia, we know that she's got a big challenge ahead of her working with her team. And Sophia's challenge is even bigger because her team has a bunch of people who are stressed out. And because of that stress, all of her top performers are quitting. The new ideas have dried up. There's no innovation happening inside her group. And you add to that, things aren't getting done on time, and the customers that they have are really unhappy. And I understand that a lot of folks have been in this kind of situation, and in a lot of ways, the pandemic has brought out a lot of these traits that come out of the level of stress and disengagement that we have. So Sophia has a disengaged team.
And the problem with employee engagement and the way that we talk about it is that the system's broken. If you look at most corporate environments right now, employee engagement issues are usually people try to fix them with ping pong tables or free lunches or snacks or other things like that. When we try to measure employee engagement in the workplace, a lot of the time it's done through bad surveys that are more like smile face, are you happy here? Unless that's actually getting at the rigor of what employee engagement is. And then the worst part is that we ask all of these questions of our employees and we collect all of this data and we put them through survey fatigue, but then at the end of the day, there's no follow through. There's nothing that actually changes. And so we ask people for their opinions and then we don't actually do anything about that. And so, Clint alluded to this a little bit earlier, but a lot of the employee engagement research and where it really founded comes from burnout and turnover and a lot of those other aspects, right? Employee engagement at the core of it is actually broken down into these three things. Psychological safety, right? Are people given the opportunity to try new things? On that earlier slide, Clint talked about Sophia's team being stressed out and no new ideas. Well, maybe the new ideas exist, but people don't feel comfortable or safe to actually say them out loud, or people aren't in a position to do so. Psychological availability, right? Do employees have the resources to focus and throw themselves into the work, right? Are people just stressed out because they have everything and it is overwhelming and their plate is too full? Do people have the tools or the resources that they need in order to do their job? And then finally, right, meaningfulness. The idea that people can perform in a consistent way with the needs of the organization, right? That age old, what's in it for me? When you connect people's work to the outcome of the organization, magically employee engagement goes up. When people see that what they're doing makes a difference and has meaning, and they're not just running on the hamster wheel, they're able to actually throw themselves into their work and really be engaged.
So this is probably a good place for us to just pause a moment and see if anybody has questions so far as we introduce the idea of employee engagement. So this is an opportunity to use the chat box if you've got any questions. And unfortunately, with my screen sharing, I'm not able to make it out. Anirvan, do you have anything in the chat or any questions for us?
All right.
I will take that as a no, and we'll go ahead and move on. Great. So one of the questions that you probably have is, well, how can Sophia engage her team? What are some of the steps that she can do that are going to make a difference with her organization so they can get that innovation back, so that the key players will stick around? And we think that there are two big factors that will make a difference here. And these, in addition to being factors that the research points out, are also the factors that Marc and I studied in our respective dissertations on employee engagement. The first factor is how the employee joins the organization. And when we took a look at this information, you see the connection between the individual, their goals and their values, and the goals and values of the organization as being primary. And that is really Marc's area of specialization, and he's going to give a few tips on that in a moment. Where I looked at was the relationship maintenance, the quality of the employee's relationship with their manager. And I know that that seems really basic, that whether or not you get onboarded well or whether or not you have a good relationship with your manager would affect your work life. But it's stunning how many managers don't see that direct connection between taking care of their employees and the employees taking care of them in the business. So we have a few practical tips and takeaways that we'd like to go ahead and give you.
So the first one, and where you really need to start, is be who you are and own your culture. When either advertising for a new job or interviewing people, provide as realistic of a job preview as possible, right? You want to make sure that people know exactly what is it that they're signing up for. If you're not a collaborative or people work independently within your organization, don't say that teamwork is one of your most important values. That's going to do nothing good for you or them, because they're going to come in as somebody who's looking to partner. They're going to ask for help, and then they're going to learn, well, that's not the way we do things here. Edwin Schein, who's really the father of the idea of corporate culture, really said that culture isn't the beer kegs and the ping pong tables and the happy hours after work. What culture really is at the core of it is shared behaviors and shared ways that people go about doing their job. So what that really is understanding who are you, what are your core competencies, and making sure that people know about it. The next one is making sure that you're using evidence-based hiring practices. All too often we hear about the top salesperson who's really outperforming the rest of their team. They get promoted into manager, and then what happens? You don't have a good manager, and you're missing your best salesperson, and all of your results have gone down the tube. So what you want to do is take the competencies and that culture that we talked about just a moment ago, and really make sure that what you're doing is predicting those core competencies and those core criteria for selection, right? Using things like assessments, using standardized interviews, making sure that everybody who's hiring within your organization is singing off the same song sheet. You have some kind of structure in place to make sure that everything is really heading in the direction that you need.
A couple of other things that we can do is we can really look at developing our managers. So what's interesting is that when we look at statistics of manager training across the world, we find that managers with fewer than 3 years on the job only have a 1 in 3 chance of getting some kind of training in management skills. And like Mark just talked about, there's this, I'm not even sure what the right word is. There's a frequent practice where we take a really good salesperson or a really good accountant or a really good engineer, and we say, you're really good at that job. Why don't you go be a manager? Without recognizing that leading people is its own separate and distinct skill set. And we don't train managers on those skills and then wonder why it doesn't work out. So, what's missing between being the best salesperson and being a sales manager? Well, it's things like communications training, how to effectively transition from a mindset where it's about what I accomplish to a mindset where it's about what the team accomplishes. Delegation, goal setting, conflict management, all of those are critical to ensuring that the workforce stays engaged. And unfortunately, managers aren't getting the training they need in that. In fact, according to the Association for Talent Development, most managers don't get leadership training until they've been on the job for almost 10 years. That's just staggering to me that we would have managers be in the job for 10 years without teaching them those skills that they need to be effective managers. It can be really demotivating. It's a long time for bad habits to settle in. So, we've all seen the effects of a person who wasn't right for management being promoted and then not developed. So it's definitely a practice that we can take on that will raise the engagement levels on the team, because good managers make a difference. And then finally, we need to hold managers accountable. So Mark has talked a bit about looking at what we call competency models. You might have heard of them as KSAs or knowledge, skills, and abilities, or minimum criteria for the job. There's a bunch of different ways that we talk about those competencies. But if you go back to those competencies and you sort out what they should be and what managers should be accomplishing inside those competency models, and hold those managers accountable to meeting them, it will also make a difference in your organization. It'll allow you to get the dead weight out, because some managers, they're not great managers. They're great individual contributors, they're great human beings, but not great managers. And so let's help those managers find jobs that are more appropriate for their actual skills, and help your organization succeed by moving those managers out who are not particularly strong. And make sure that you reward those managers who are doing really well. Hold them up as examples inside the organization. Let people see what a good, solid manager looks like. And that'll make a difference, because employees will know that your organization values those managers who do a great job at their management skills. So I wanted to take a moment and make sure that we could answer any questions you had. We intentionally kept this as a very simple presentation, knowing that you've heard from a lot of people today and knowing that these concepts are fairly simple, but we also wanted you to know that there's a good bit of science behind what we're sharing and a good bit of research. So while we wait and see if there are any questions in the chat, I just wanted to jump back, Mark. At the beginning of the presentation, we talked a little bit about some of the bad things that come out of employees who are disengaged. Maybe you could speak for a moment about some of the good things that happen when employees are engaged.
Sure. Employee engagement from the academic perspective is actually the white whale, right? That's the thing that everybody should be getting, because it acts as the mediator and kind of a driver to so many great things, right? When there's an engaged workforce, you see higher productivity, you see higher productivity, you see higher profitability as well. You also see better customer service scores, lower turnover, lower burnout. There's all of these, all of these things that not just the HR department cares about, but the CFO, the CEO, the things that they care about as well, ends up being actualized, right? Engaged environments also happen to be more innovative and creative. There's all of these different things where if people feel those three aspects that I mentioned earlier, the psychological safety, the availability, and the meaningfulness in their work, you really just see them go above and beyond and end up actualizing a lot of the corporate strategy that you might be working towards.
Yeah. So end of the day, I think we could say that engaged employees are more productive and they're more profitable. So if you want an organization that has employees who are doing things that make you money or meet your mission, if you're in a nonprofit setting, you want your employees to be engaged.
Clint, there is a question here which essentially talks about the future at workplace. Essentially, what they're saying is these psychological safety and the availability all make sense, but given the fact that we're being influenced by the digital world, what's or how is that shaping up what you guys just talked about?
So I'll take a stab at it, and then Mark, if you've got anything to add, feel free to jump on. I don't think it changes a whole lot, right? As we've seen during the pandemic, our need for human connection is still pretty strong, right? There's still work that we need to do to stay connected with one another. And as the shape of our workforce changes, as we introduce more things like AI, and as we introduce more automation, it doesn't necessarily mean that our need for human connection changes. Our need to feel safe, our need to feel available, our need to feel like we're doing meaningful work doesn't go away. You know, I'm old, right? You can tell by the gray in the beard since I gave up dyeing it during the pandemic. You know, I've been through a couple of technological shifts in the workplace. My first job, I was looking at candidate files that were literally, you know, in file folders that were inside giant filing cabinets. Filing cabinets in my office these days are artifacts that should be moved into a museum. You know, I took my kids into an office about 5 years ago when they were still in high school, and they were just amazed by the number of filing cabinets that an HR department had. And most of them were empty. So the way that we do our work changes. We don't need as many people being file clerks or stenographers or some of those jobs that changed, but their basic psychological needs in the workforce didn't change when the technology shifted. So Mark, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I would. You know, Clint alluded earlier to some of the research that we had done together that looked at organizational socialization and how you bring people into the workplace. And so one of the biggest findings there was the connection between the goals and values of the individual and the organization leading to a more engaged workforce, right? If I can achieve my life goals through this company, I'm more likely to go above and beyond. So what we have with this shift towards digital work, the way that it has, is really a great opportunity to throw out the idea of work-life balance and really make it work-life integration. I have a 9-month-old right now, and so I've spent a lot of time during the day playing with her and having a good time and making my schedule work. As an entrepreneur, I kind of have that freedom. And then at night, you're probably going to find me in front of the computer doing work after she goes to sleep. This is an opportunity when she's not at daycare and I'm not in an office that I probably would never have had with her. And so I'm happier and more productive because I know that if I want to go to sleep, I just have to buckle down and get my work done. And so I think that the better work-life integration is something that we have the opportunity to recognize and actually strive towards.
Right. I have a question, if I may, and you know, knowing some of your backgrounds, one of the things that we know, especially in the mergers and acquisitions world, is the level of information that gets shared or not shared. You know, and similarly in today's scenario with the pandemic happening and companies under cost pressure, a lot of times. People at junior levels are suspicious about their mid-management or the mid-managers as well as the senior managers because they know that their companies are under cost pressure, but what they don't know is what is it that the senior management is doing, and therefore questioning the whole psychological availability. You know, so what would you say that companies would need to do in this sort of scenario?
Yeah, so I'll take a run at it. You know, companies are always going to be going through some sort of change, right? Change is our new normal, or change is the only constant, as some people like to say. And I think there's a lot to be said for creating organizations that have a high degree of change agility. So this is an organization where the employees expect to be somewhat innovative. Maybe not broad changes to the go-to-market strategy or the product strategy of the organization, but, innovative at least within their own departments, if not further out than that. So those organizations that set up a culture and a climate where employees know that change is happening have certain expectations that things like the strategy will be communicated to them, that they'll get some kind of heads up about the change that's coming down the pipeline, and that there will be some transparent communication. And you'll find that all of the things that make organizations more able to change and innovate are tucked up into, well, maybe not all of the things, but a good portion of the things that make organizations innovative and change agile are tucked up into those three key parts of engagement. So employees have to feel safe. They have to feel like they're not going to be attacked if they go through the change and mess it up, right? Employees have to be available to mentally participate in the change. We have to give them time and space to do that. We have to give them time and change to process. So, for example, on an M&A deal, where we might have an announcement day, and an announcement day, for those of you that haven't had the pleasure of going through it, is where you sit all of the employees down, either in person or virtually, and you say, congratulations, we've just been bought, or congratulations, we have a new investor or partner. And the employees need time to process that. One of the huge mistakes I see companies making is assuming that just because top leaders understand the change that's coming down the pipeline, all of the employees do as well. And that can make it very, very difficult for the leaders to have empathy and understand that employees need to have some brain space to process all of the changes that are coming up on them. And then finally, the need for meaningfulness doesn't change. When employees see their job as meaningful compared to the organizational mission, or in alignment with the organizational mission, it makes a huge difference. I remember a story that was told, and unfortunately I can't remember which US president it was that went into our space agency, and one of the janitors seemed particularly happy, and the story is told that our leader went up to that individual and said, why are you so happy? And the janitor's response was, because I'm putting people into space. And what that janitor saw through conversation was that his contribution of just taking out the garbage and straightening things up made it so that other people in the organization could do these phenomenal things in space. And this is a person that saw their job as meaningful and valuable, and they were happy. So I think that all of these different pieces of employee engagement make a huge difference when it comes to organizations being agile enough to change and meet the demands of a new century.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm just saying there are a couple of chats. There are, so Anirban Basak says a sense of purpose is important. Any reflection on that?
Yeah, so I think that's very much the same thing as meaningfulness, that sense of purpose. Mark, it looks like I cut you off though, sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. That's, when we talk about the owning your culture and having the competency model, right? That's the purpose, right? The mission or the values of the organization. That shouldn't just be a poster that you have on the wall, but that should be, this is what we do and this is why we do it. We are a company that does X, Y, Z, and this is our purpose for doing it. And if everybody understands that purpose and everybody knows what that is, and this is why we make our decisions, and all of our decisions should be geared towards doing something in particular, that's where you're going to see engagement soar, especially if you start making hiring and decisions and promotion decisions, and the leader member, the person in their subordinates are kind of gearing things and managing towards that. You're going to see that performance soar.
Excellent. There's another question from Alexander Garashchenko. How can this be positioned into performance reviews?
Yeah. You want to start there, Clint? Or?
Sure. This is one that's near and dear to my heart. So in my current corporate job, in addition to leading our HR M&A function, I also own all of our people analytics. And this is an area that I'm pretty passionate about. I personally believe that if your organization does an employee engagement survey and you want to take it seriously, that survey scores should be considered before anybody is put onto a succession plan. So if your organization does either formal or informal succession planning, and that's where a group of people get together and decide who our next leaders for key and critical positions should be, your employee engagement score should absolutely be part of that. I mean, why would you take a manager who can't take care of a team with 4 or 5 people on it and give them an area of broader responsibility when they can't take care of their smaller teams? And I see it happen all the time. So it goes back to what I was harping on around, we don't do enough manager training and we don't hold managers accountable enough. So if we hold those managers accountable, if we train them, and then going back before that to what Mark was talking about, we select the right managers, it can make an enormous difference for the organization. So table stakes, like just table stakes, should be making sure that your employee engagement survey scores are fed into your succession planning and into your performance management. Like, why would you give a manager a raise who's in the bottom quartile of the engagement scores across your enterprise? What's the signal that sends that you're rewarding that kind of performance as a leader? Yeah. I could go for days on this topic, but I think I'll stop there.
Yeah, I actually want to add on a little bit, because it makes me think about something that Klint said when we were talking about M&A deals, right? The ambiguity and the uncertainty around what happens, that's what leads to disengagement. That's what leads to people not being able to make the connection for meaningfulness. That's what, and the not feeling available or not feeling safe to do things. And so what we've actually done at Staff Geek with some of our automating and kind of the taking customized assessments and making sure that you're hiring based on just the customized needs of the organization, we've actually taken that into the performance management sphere as well. So you take your competencies, you take your what we call the DNA, the distinct native attributes of the organization, and you do 360 reviews around, well, how well are these people doing these things, right? And that what that does there is that provides immensely positive role clarity, making sure that people know this is what is important. These are the core behaviors. These are the core competencies of what we do. And then take it the next step and say, this is how you're doing against that. Using not just the simple Likert scale of agree, disagree, but really providing feedback on, you should do this more, you should do this less, you should do this the same amount that you're already doing, really will, and pairing that with just some simple coaching. Number one, that allows for a better relationship, and that gives the tools to the manager to have that conversation and have a clear conversation that will really drive performance within their team. And then that also provides the opportunity for the employee to really feel comfortable, feel like they have the data to allow for that psychological availability. They have the feedback from their manager that makes them feel, okay, this is what we're going to work on, and this is what we're going to do. And it ties in that meaningfulness, and that's going to drive your employee engagement.
Excellent. And I guess so one last question, and this would be for me, kind of extending from the performance review, and an area that I feel very, very closely connected as well, is around the entire recruitment. How do you ensure that when you're hiring, especially mid-level managers, and that they have the right, I like the DNA acronym. I mean, we've used that in GE a lot, but we would use the biological DNA. But this distinct native attribute, that's something I learned new today. But coming back to my question, essentially what I wanted to ask was, how do you ensure that when you hire mid-level managers that they have the attributes? And secondly, what can we do to change the way jobs get posted to include these attributes?
You mind if I start with this one, Klint?
Yeah, absolutely.
So having a good process really in your selection and recruitment process really makes it easy to actually tie everything in here, right? When you post a job, posting exactly as clear of, this is what this job is going to be doing. These are what your responsibilities. When have your recruiters, or that first conversation making sure that this person knows here's the good, the bad, the ugly about the job. Every job has that thing, right? Whether it's the administrative part of your job, whether it's that janitor who has to sometimes, clean the microwave when somebody microwaved the, tuna fish, whatever. There's a bad part of every job, and it's knowing what it is, and being upfront with it in the recruitment process. But then on the back end, to make sure that you have those clear competencies and the DNA of the person etched out. This is what we need. These are how we make decisions. This is how we like to collaborate. This is how we like efficiency or creativity to happen. And then giving each candidate the opportunity to demonstrate their skills, right? Asking good behavioral interview questions, using situational judgment tests or other things like role plays or case studies or inbox assessments, using psychometric assessments, seeing from a personality perspective, is this the right fit? Because what happens all too often is somebody can demonstrate they have the ability to do it. They might have done it a few times, but you know what? That is completely the opposite of what they do. And so what you end up doing is you put somebody in a position where every single day they are going against the grain of what their natural inclinations are or their natural tendencies. And over time, you keep going against the grain and you're going to burn out. And that's just going to make it really hard, right? You can take the introvert and you can put them into the extroverted role. They can find a way to do it. They can find a way to be successful, and that's okay, right? They can create that situation for themselves. But if you do it over and over and over again, that person's going to come home at the end of the day and be exhausted every day, and they're going to be burned out, and you're going to see more sick days, and you're going to see more, more issues. So that's good practices that take what I like to call the multiple hurdle approach. You put in different steps through the recruitment process. You make sure that people are all rated using the same criteria, that every candidate gets the same experience, and you're really going to be able to see the difference between the good and the great.
I think that was a good summary. Yeah.
Yeah. Clint, do you want to add to that, or?
I've learned that when something is perfect, you should never add to it.
Very good. Very good. So, yeah, I agree with you. And I think that was kind of a good sort of takeaway to end the session. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you both, Dr. Kendrick and Dr. Marc Prine, for sharing your research, your input, your experience, as well as your day-to-day practices that you come across. So thank you, and we hope to see you soon.
Great. Thank you.